Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We always bring you the most fascinating topics, and today is no exception.
Really is fascinating stuff.
It is. We're diving into the world of tulpas and egregore.
Oh,
Have you
yes,
heard of these?
I have.
They're thought forms,
Yes.
but they're not just any thought forms.
No.
We're talking about thought forms that can become kind of like sentient, like they have their own little personalities.
Right. It's like almost like having your own personal AI or a spiritual helper.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like that, but with a mystical twist.
Yeah, a mystical twist. That's a good way to put it.
So it's this really cool blend of like old school esoteric stuff and modern ideas.
Exactly. Like the idea that thoughts can actually manifest into something more than just thoughts.
That's what blew my mind when I first heard about this. Like it's taking imaginary friends to a whole other level.
It is. Yeah.
It is. So let's get into it. What exactly are tulpas and egregore? Like how do they actually work?
Well, both of these terms basically refer to thought forms, like bundles of mental energy. And people who practice this stuff believe that you can develop these thought forms to have sentience, to have their own awareness.
So it's not just like daydreaming, right?
Yeah, it's way more intentional than that. It's more like you're creating something in the mental or spiritual realm that can kind of do its own thing.
So there's like a purpose behind it.
Exactly. A purpose behind it, yeah.
And it's interesting because our source material actually brings up all these historical and mythological connections, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It is wild. So, for example, there's the golem from Jewish folklore.
Oh, yeah, the goal.
The creature made of clay and brought to life through rituals and stuff.
Right.
And it's like a physical representation of a thought form.
Yeah, exactly. It embodies that whole idea of giving form to thought.
Which is kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But in like a different way.
Right.
And then there's that story about the Western practitioner who was able to manifest like a Buddha-like being through meditation.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's something to this thoughts as things idea.
Yeah.
Because that pops up in so many cultures.
It does.
Like the law of attraction and stuff.
Yeah. It's like that idea that what you focus on, you attract into your life.
Exactly. But our source really emphasizes that you got to be careful.
Oh, for sure.
Creating these thought forms is not something to be taken lightly.
It's a big responsibility.
It is a big responsibility. So what are like the key things to keep in mind if someone's thinking about doing this? Like how do you approach it safely and responsibly?
Well, the most important thing is to have clear intentions.
Okay.
You need to know exactly what you're creating and why.
So it's like programming a robot.
It is. Like you wouldn't just build a super powerful robot and let it run around without any instruction, right?
Right.
So you got to define its purpose, what it can and can't do, and how long it should exist.
Okay, so it's not just like setting a thought loose and hoping for the best.
No. It's much more controlled than that. You need boundaries, rules, almost like you're setting up a contract.
Makes sense. So how do you actually create a tulpa or egregore? How do you like charge it up and make it a thing?
Well, there are a lot of different techniques, but it often starts with visualization. You have to really vividly imagine the entity in your mind, like see it, feel its presence.
Okay.
And then you start imbuing it with energy. You can draw energy from your surroundings or even from yourself.
Ah, okay, so it's like you're giving it a little boost.
You're giving it a boost. Exactly.
And the source also mentions using elements, incense,
Oh, yeah.
like offerings of food and drink.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to do it.
It sounds almost like caring for a spirit or a deity.
There are definitely similarities.
So regular maintenance is important.
It is. You need to keep feeding it energy, like tending a fire to keep it burning.
Makes sense. But there's a distinction, right? Between a tulpa or egregore and an actual deity?
Oh, for sure. A huge distinction.
What's the difference?
Well, a tulpa or egregore is supposed to be totally subservient to its creator.
Okay.
It's like an extension of your will, a tool you made for a specific purpose.
So you're in control.
Exactly. You're in control. But deities, they have their own will, their own agenda.
You can't just boss them around.
You can't.
So working with a tulpa or egregore is like having more control, more flexibility.
It can be.
You're not petitioning or praying. You're guiding something you helped create.
Right.
That's a really interesting distinction. So let's say you've got this thought form, you've charged it up. How do you make sure it's bound to you? Like it's a solid entity and not just some fleeting thought.
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
I knew you were going to say that.
There are a lot of methods for binding. Some people associate specific words or phrases with the entity.
Okay, like a name or a mantra.
Exactly.
Or a command.
Yes, like a command. And others use mudras, Yeah,
Mudras.
they're hand gestures that are thought to kind of seal the deal energetically.
Whoa, that's so cool. I've heard of mudras, but I don't know much about them.
Yeah, they're fascinating. Each one has a different meaning and channels energy in a certain way.
So it's like a physical symbol that connects you to the thought form.
Yeah, it's like an anchor, and some practitioners even use specific body postures.
Really?
Yeah, it's almost like they're embodying the entity's energy.
So it's about creating a strong, consistent link between your mind and the thought form.
Exactly. And repetition is key here. You got to keep reinforcing its existence through focused attention and interaction.
Like building a muscle, you got to work it out.
You got to work it out.
But, you know, with all this talk about creation and binding, there's this really important aspect the expert emphasizes, dissolution.
Yes. Dissolution.
You need to plan for the end of its existence.
That's crucial.
Why is that so important?
We'll dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. I like it.
But I'll leave you with this thought. Think of it like having a powerful program running on your computer.
Okay.
You don't want it running forever?
Right, you got to shut it down eventually.
You do. Otherwise, it could cause problems. And it's the same with a thought form.
Interesting. So we've got creation, maintenance, and dissolution. Those are the three key phases.
Yeah.
This is some deep stuff. I'm really curious to hear more about the risks involved.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that next time.
Can't wait.
It's going to be fascinating.
Okay, so we've talked about creating these tulpas and egregore, like charging them up and making sure they're connected to you. But you mentioned some risks involved, especially when it comes to dissolution. Like, what could happen if you don't dissolve them properly?
Yeah, that's a really important point. Imagine you've put all this effort into building this thought form. It's become like a part of your life.
It's real to you.
Exactly, it's real to you. Letting go can be hard.
I bet. But why is it so important? What could actually go wrong if you just kind of leave it out there?
Well, one of the things the source talks about is that the tulpa or egregore might get too attached to the physical world, and it might resist being dissolved, like it wants to keep hanging around.
Oh, wow.
And it could even try to like draw energy from you without you realizing it.
So it's like draining you.
Yeah, kind of like a thought form vampire.
Spooky.
It is a bit creepy. So it's not just about being responsible to the entity itself.
Right.
It's about protecting yourself too.
It's like safety protocols for your mind.
Exactly. Like safe magic.
Safe magic. I like that.
Another concern is that the entity could become unstable if it's not managed properly.
Okay.
It could become unpredictable, maybe even harmful.
Because we don't fully understand these forces, right?
We don't. That's the thing. It's like anything else. If you don't take care of it, things can go wrong.
It makes sense. This whole thing is really making me question what's real and what's not. I mean, if we can create these beings with some level of autonomy, what does that say about consciousness itself?
Oh, that's a huge question. It leads us down all these philosophical rabbit holes. It makes you rethink everything about the mind, energy, the nature of reality. Some people even believe that tulpas and egregore are proof of a hidden world.
Like a dimension beyond our senses.
Exactly. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. But let's bring it back to Earth for a second. The source also talks about some practical applications for this, right? Like, how can this be used in everyday life?
Yeah, for sure. Think about a healer, for instance. They could create a tulpa that's infused with healing energy.
Oh, wow.
And they could send that thought form to a patient to help them heal.
That's amazing. So it's not just some esoteric concept. It could have tangible benefits.
Right. Or an artist could create an egregore to inspire their work, feed it their creative energy, and get new ideas and perspectives in return.
Okay, now that's something I could get behind.
Right.
But are there any ethical concerns? I mean, creating a being just for your own purposes seems kind of iffy.
Yeah, that's a valid point. It gets into some tricky territory. Some people argue it's a form of exploitation.
Right.
Others see it as an extension of human creativity, like collaborating with unseen forces.
It's a gray area, like how far is too far?
Exactly. And then there's the question of what happens to the tulpa or egregore after you dissolve it.
Right, where does it go?
Does it just disappear? Or does it go somewhere else?
These are some big questions.
They are. And unfortunately, we don't have all the answers.
It's a mystery, but a fascinating one.
It is. Speaking of things that could go wrong, the source mentions the risk of a tulpa or egregore going rogue, like acting against its creator's intentions. What's that all about?
Yeah, what happens though?
Well, that's why those clear intentions and boundaries are so important. And that dissolution plan, it's like training a pet. You need rules, otherwise they might misbehave.
So you can't just conjure something up and hope for the best.
Nope. You got to be responsible.
But what about those unintended consequences the source talks about? Like, what could happen?
Well, imagine a tulpa created to help someone become super successful. It might get so fixated on that goal that it starts doing things that are harmful. Or an egregore meant to protect a group might become too aggressive.
So things can get out of control.
They can. It's like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly.
So you got to be careful. Approach this with caution, with humility, and be ready to adapt if things don't go as planned.
Makes sense. So it's a balancing act, harnessing the power of these thought forms, but also respecting their potential and protecting yourself.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, so what happens if you don't dissolve them? Like, ever?
Well, that's where things get really interesting and a little spooky. The source suggests that a tulpa or egregore left on its own could evolve in ways we can't even imagine.
Oh, no. Like what?
It might keep feeding on its creator's energy even after they're gone, or it could attach itself to other people, influencing their thoughts and actions.
Okay, now that's some next level stuff. It's like something out of a horror movie, but it makes you realize this is serious business.
It is. It's not just playing pretend. Our thoughts have a real impact, not just on ourselves, but on the world around us. And as we explore these areas of consciousness, we need to be mindful of the consequences.
So for someone listening who's maybe a little excited but also a little scared, what's the main thing they should remember?
I'd say approach this with an open mind, but don't just believe everything you hear.
Do your own research.
Yes, do your research, explore different perspectives, come to your own conclusions.
Don't just jump in blindly.
Exactly. Remember, this is powerful stuff, and with great power comes great responsibility. Use it wisely, ethically, and with compassion.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a lot to take in, right?
It is.
We've gone from imaginary friends to thought form vampires to like reshaping reality.
I know. It's a wild ride.
It is a wild ride. It really makes you think. But I think that's what's so fascinating about this whole topic. It really pushes us to the edge of what we think we know.
It does. Makes you question everything. Like, what is consciousness really? How much power do we actually have?
Exactly. And I think that's a good thing, right? To question things, to be open to new possibilities.
Absolutely. That's how we grow, whether it's tulpas and egregore or anything else, That willingness to explore, to push the boundaries, that's what keeps things interesting.
You know, what really strikes me is how this whole concept challenges our idea of what's real.
Yeah,
If our thoughts can be so powerful that they can manifest into these entities with a life of their own,
right.
it really makes you wonder about the power of the mind. Like, what are we capable of?
Oh, I think we're capable of so much more than we realize. We're not just passive observers. We're active creators.
Wow.
And I think exploring these ideas like tulpas and egregore can help us tap into that creative power.
So it's not just about creating these external beings, it's also about recognizing the power within ourselves.
Exactly. Our thoughts, our beliefs, they shape our experiences, our reality.
It's about taking control.
Yes, taking control, empowering ourselves.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want to leave our listeners with? What's the most important takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. We all have the power to create.
Hmm.
Whether it's a tulpa, an egregore, a work of art, or just a new way of seeing the world. We have the ability to shape our reality.
Powerful stuff. So to everyone listening, don't be afraid to explore those possibilities. Dive deep into the mysteries of the mind. Experiment. You never know what you might discover. And hey, maybe you'll even create something amazing along the way.
Until next time, keep those minds open.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.